our next item of business is the roundtable discussion that we decided on a topic on for this meeting, and it's building safety training during a pandemic. Best practices, pricing, and technology to support the transition from face-to-face to online training. So just a little bit of an introduction to this. This came about purely from some anecdotal discussions between some of the members earlier this year when the pandemic started to challenge how we were doing our business. We were chatting about some of the difficulties that we were encountering in getting training on building safety, which is still hugely needed regardless of whether we have a pandemic or not. And we talked about the challenges we were having, how we were needing to adapt what we did. We talked about some suggestions back and forth, and we thought, this would probably be a good topic for the greater group, and we have other individuals that might benefit from some of the things that we did and learning the ropes as we did, and learning about how we went about to do things. So we brought together a group of panelists, and we gave them some topics of interest to talk about in relation to this category. So they're each going to give you a bit of an overview of themselves and their organization, and then they're going to talk about how the pandemic affected their training business, how they adapted, maybe some of their technology and support needs, the financial impacts, and then if they have any suggestions and best practices from what they did that they can provide to people, they're going to pass those along also. So again, please feel free to use the Q&A section, but we're going to probably try and hold off on answering the questions until the end so that we can at least get through the presentations and then allow for the Q&A at the end. But if you have a question directed at a specific individual, just note it at the start of your question to say, so-and-so, I have a question about this. So I will note we do have an additional panelist, which was not shown on your original agenda, and that is Jessie Sorensen, and she's going to join us from the Colorado chapter of ICC, and we welcome her and thank her for joining us. And so with that, I'm going to go a little bit out of order, and I'm going to lead us off in the discussion and tell you a little bit about how we approach things in Canada, or I should say in Ontario, I should say. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Lynn Balfour, and my day job is I'm the Director of Education Development for the Ontario Building Officials Association. So our little bit of marketing is we're a self-governing, non-for-profit professional association, and we represent probably close to 2,000 building officials in municipalities across Ontario. We're committed to maintaining the highest degree of professionalism in the field of code administration, including plan review and building inspection, to ensure public health and safety, fire protection and prevention, accessibility, and the protection of the environment and resource conservation. So that's our little marketing to tell you who we are. In reality, we are probably the primary delivery organization for the Ontario Building Code in Ontario here. We currently have about 30 courses in our training platform, and the majority of those courses were primarily face-to-face delivery in like 5-day durations. So they were 5-day courses held in classroom type settings. Our primary participants were municipal building officials, but we do market and have quite a bit of participation from designers and contractors in the building industry. Our courses were primarily offered during the weekday, but we also have a partnership with George Brown College, which themselves are a primary delivery agent for similar courses to ours that were developed by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Their courses are primarily offered evenings and weekends, and their target is designers, contractors, and the general public. So our partnership in the future envisions, integrating our training materials to create what we would like to say would be the kind of best product for the building industry. So how did the pandemic affect our training business? So traditionally, we offered courses in our on-site training facility, which is in our head office in Toronto, or courses were offered locally through some municipalities or through our chapter network. When the pandemic hit in the middle of March, we'd just begun our spring training program, which would have run from the beginning of March to the end of June, and we had about 20 courses that were scheduled to run during that time. On March 13th, everything fell apart, pretty much. All municipalities stopped travel, training, and the following week, we made the decision to basically cancel the courses that we had scheduled through mid-April. But we quickly realized that was going to be way too optimistic, and we ended up canceling our entire spring session. And then we had to change focus on how we were going to adapt to the uncertainty of what training was going to look like this fall and beyond. With that 30% loss of our annual training, the cancellation had an enormous impact on our training revenues and the viability of our association. Fortunately, there were some federal grants that were offered to assist small businesses coping with reduced revenues, which we qualified for, and that kind of got us through, the worst of the pandemic and the worst of the financial impact. However, the ever-changing pandemic environment means we have no firm plan in place to be able to offer in-person training in the foreseeable future. And coming to this realization meant that the only way we were going to be able to offer training was adapt to an online delivery. So we spent the summer basically modifying our materials and training our instructors to go with this type of training delivery. So how did we adapt, and what type of support was needed? Suffice to say, I kind of wish I had a crystal ball last winter, so I could have bought up Zoom stock like it was going out of style. Be a pretty fortunate person right now. But if nothing else, this pandemic has made us all basically techno geeks and virtual savvy. Despite our challenges some days with, making our presentations work and making everything come together. The OBOA, we quickly linked into Zoom as our primary platform to deliver virtual training. We briefly looked into other learning management systems, such as, quote unquote, we have Black, which was used by Georgetown College, but it had such a huge learning curve, and we just quite frankly didn't have the time to learn a new system like that. And when we looked at the approach that we would need to do the virtual courses, we found we could keep it simple and strategize that the instructor simply needed to duplicate their classroom setting in a Zoom environment. So instead of looking at people in a classroom, they were looking at their students on a screen. That being said, there were still some challenges in that some participants didn't always have the needed technology as well. Some municipalities were reluctant to allow Zoom on computers and laptops that staff were using because of the challenges that Zoom had at the beginning with hacking. So we were fortunate that we had in-house IT staff that were able to address most of these issues as they arose. And we put up a backup plan together for our instructors who were not able to handle the technical requirements, hardware and software needed for technical delivery, but thankfully we haven't had to utilize the backup plan yet. Our in-class model for materials utilized a hard copy instructor manual, a hard copy participant manual, and a slide deck to utilize. And timing was full days for a week. So we kept this same for the virtual delivery, with the only change being we now had to mail out all of our manuals to participants to their home addresses, because most of them were still working from home. And we moved to half-day sessions over 2 weeks instead of full-day sessions over a week. We found that it's challenging enough to sit in front of a computer, but trying to sit in front of a computer and learn complex technical information was just going to be a bit problematic for successfully running the courses. We toyed with the idea of moving materials fully online in more of like a webinar or a voiceover format, but cost would have been prohibitive in our audience. was really more receptive to the live instructional experience, and we found that has worked really well. Being able to interact between the instructor and the participants, it's went over well with the courses that we've done so far. We are recording all of our sessions so participants can review after the fact, and we're strategizing a plan to package the recordings into a self-study model so that we can have another means to utilize the training that doesn't have to be just the online version. So some of our model and pricing impacts, we actually didn't really change our business model at all in between the virtual and the in-class. Our pricing ended up the same. We changed a bit of the remuneration that we were paying our instructors, just to acknowledge that, you know, preparing for the virtual classes was going to be a bit more time consuming than it was to do for the in-class sessions. So we basically had no change to the model and our pricing impacts on that. Some of the suggestions that we might put forward, first and foremost, is a plan. And when you think you've planned everything, plan some more. Because if you don't think it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong. So be prepared and think through all the things that that could happen in the course and plan for them. Second, have IT support available for initial setup and to assist with issues as they arise. Our IT staff have been incredible, and they've significantly automated our processes so that Zoom invitations are set out automatically to instructors and participants, and our instructors actually have web portals to access all their class information and documentation, and then can resend Zoom invitations from there, and they all, it's one quick place to access everything. Set expectations for participants and your instructors and give them guidelines for delivery, technical requirements, and professionalism. Highly suggest limiting your course numbers of participants to keep it manageable for instructors. Our in-class numbers were limited to 25 to 30, and we set our limits for the virtual at 20. And some of our instructors have some challenges with that, trying to keep track of people and trying to keep track of what's going on. Acknowledge and make allowances for courses that are more challenging to deliver virtually, especially where the interaction between participants and instructor is a large part of the course. For example, we have 2 legal courses in our stable that cover the Building Code Act and Environment for Enforcement. They're really text-heavy courses, and they're not really suited to virtual delivery, but we really have no choice at this point, and because they're needed for our provincial certifications. So as a result, we've had to manage expectation for these, and the instructors make themselves available after the course is finished to assist with questions that arise. So where is this going to fit in our post-pandemic training? Just a little fun fact, because it provides some context. Ontario's population is about 15 million people, and that's about not quite 40% of Canada's entire population. In land area, we're about 1 million square kilometers. So located in Southern Ontario, Toronto is our most populous city. And from there, it takes pretty much 2 days of traveling to get out of Ontario. So I mention this because it illustrates some of the current challenges in getting training to remote, rural, and northern areas of the province. So in saying that, I anticipate that this virtual learning experience is going to be part of our training platform alongside in-class training once pandemic restrictions allow us. We see this as a means of getting training to all areas of our province without people having to travel great distances to access it. And this also fits in with the feedback that we've been getting from participants that really appreciate being able to take training without having to travel to Toronto and all the associated costs with that. So this methodology will allow us to offer and deliver training to other provinces in the country if that's so needed and so desired by other provinces. So just a few quick stats. So far this fall, we offered and are offering about 20 virtual courses for a total of about 350 to 400 participants. We're going to continue on, obviously, in the winter, and as long as pandemic restrictions remain. We did have a couple of in-class sessions that's a couple of our chapters wanted to offer, and we are tentatively going ahead of that, where gathering limits will allow it, and of course subject to social distancing requirements and safety practices. However, I can say that's a moving target, and it changes every day whether that's going to be allowed in the future. So that's really just a brief overview of how OPOA adapted to this training environment. As I said, if any questions, we'll put them into the Q&A, and we'll go on. So I'm going to actually call on Nick Hill, and he's going to give us the New Zealand perspective.
Thanks, Madam Chairman. Thanks, Lynn. So what you heard from Lynn, you'll probably hear a little bit from what we've been doing in New Zealand as well. So in New Zealand, the building officials represents in excess of 1,300 building surveyors across the country. We're a long, narrow island that dominates Australia to the west of Australia, and we're a population of around about 5 million, with about 1 million actually New Zealanders living offshore, who are busy trying to get home at the moment. I think the key thing for us in terms of the impact of the pandemic, were almost immediately we had a severe hit on probably our biggest registration intake for the year for about 3 or 4 years. And within weeks of the lockdown occurring on the 25th of March, we started to receive cancellations, requests for credits, and our forward book going into June, July was absolutely decimated. The board asked me to review our budget, and it quickly became apparent that we were potentially going to lose at least 70% of our training income. And our training income is approximately 40% of the institute's revenue year by year. And part of the reason for the cancellation approach was the uncertainty around the tenure of the lockdown, but our local jurisdictions were also impacted severely. Many of them have commercial interests at airports and ports, etc. And those commercial interests, which delivered revenue dividends, all of a sudden came to a halt. So you saw the larger metropolitan councils, such as Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch, Tauranga, and so forth, all sending signals to their staff, no matter where they worked, whether it was a building or in other areas of local government responsibility, that they needed to curtail expenditure immediately. So we were on the front line of that impact, and we really still haven't recovered to a large degree. I think the question for us is, as soon as we got out of the shock situation, was how we adapt. And so the team here looked at what we needed to do. And luckily, we already had in place a process that we'd started to move forward on over a period of about the last 18 months, which was moving our core training material, which consisted of around about 24 modules across our building code, into bite-sized chunks. And we have a sort of a 3-door philosophy, which was accessibility, applicability, and affordability. So we'd already started to migrate a number of courses into smaller bite sizes, but not sufficient to really fill the gaps that we were looking to fill. So we needed to quickly move also our members into an environment of working from home, and we quickly developed a video called Working From Home that got our members up to speed and how they should use social media and conferencing, and an ability to changed the way they worked, because literally all of our council staff were actually immediately sent home, apart from essential people that needed to keep essential services going. We did modify a number of courses quite quickly, and I suppose a couple of those had already been in the pipeline, which worked well. And we looked at moving some of our courses into a hybrid situations, well, online, but looking forward, developing them into a hybrid situation as well. So we had we prepared a lot of pre-reading material and sent that out, and then we'd run a tutorial, which is effectively a webinar tutorial, and then we would put an assessment at the end. Most of our jurisdictions require assessments, and I think one of the key things that we saw in the assessment processes in the online environment is we had to be a little bit tougher. So there was a heavier focus on how we went about our assessments. The impact, I suppose, on the business model on a day-to-day basis was an interesting one for us. We generally priced our course material at around about $600 a day. That covered the development. We amortize our training across usually 3 to 5 years, depending on where we think the duration of the course might last. And we build into that the accommodation and facilitated costs. We're a long, narrow country, and one of the biggest issues we have is providing accessible training for people in the north, but way down to the south. Some councils don't mind sending their staff long distances, others prefer to keep it local. So we looked at how we had to pitch the price model. We came up with a model that was roughly around a third of a day rate for about 2 hours. And that reflected the development costs that went into each training project. We also analysed that there were likely going to be risks, and we started to see risks coming through from councils quite quickly in terms of demanding courses that were very short, which we knew would probably compromise the long-term capability of our building surveyors, whether they're in the consenting or inspection side of it. And we had to fight off a number of sort of fly-by-night providers that suddenly appeared in the market. And so we went to an active, we undertook an active campaign to basically alert our members to the cowboys that were coming into the training market. And a lot of them were individuals that had been laid off in the private sector. I suppose from our point of view, we counted the short course with, as I said before, the tougher assessment process. So as far as best practice is concerned, what do we learn from this whole approach? I think the key for me in running an organisation that relies heavily on training delivery, all of a sudden we moved from face to face, which was actually quite easy. I mean, it was, managing the training model in a face-to-face environment is pretty practical and easy to do. All of a sudden we moved to the virtual model, and we need to do it literally for everything we do. And we were sort of reliant on a very small team, or small number within our team that had technical and IT experience. So moving forward, anyone that comes into the training roles in this organisation will have an IT background, or we'll be training them in that space. There's absolutely no way that I think that the market is likely to want to revert back to total face-to-face training, and we're getting those signals already. In terms of another learning, I guess we were quite aware that the demand for training when we surveyed it came with a lot of squeaky wheels. In other words, we want this now, we want that now. And we very early on, we reacted to what we thought were potentially high demand courses, but and our investment went into converting to online, but the outcome actually didn't produce the numbers that potentially the those that were asking for it indicated they would put on the courses. So just be very mindful when you're investing. You need to prioritise and work out where your best dollar is going to be spent in terms of development. And as Lynn mentioned, our facilitators were coming back to us and saying, actually, we can't have 25 or 30 in the class. Actually, 20 is enough for this course. And in some of the courses where the technology is greater, they were actually saying limited at 10 or 11, or maybe 12. So where do we think we're going to go in the future? Well, I think the future is a hybrid approach. I think the fact that we'd already focused on our 3 doors policy was a plus for us moving forward. It didn't actually help the bottom line, but we already had a model that we could work to. It allows the self-paced own time sort of learning. The costs for the employer are more positive in this tougher environment. Go back to the fact that the assessments need to be tougher, and I guess we're going to have a rolling of the dice moving forward in terms of the price point. We will always, I think, get pressure in the short term as the Cowboys keep wanting to take our cake, and we'll just have to monitor how we do that. So that's a bit of a slice of how we handle it.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick. In the essence of expediency, I'll just get right into it, and we're going to call on Hamid Naderi to give us a bit of the overview from SK Ghosh. Thanks.
Thank you, Lynn. I will give a quick summary of what we did at SK Ghosh Associates and also at ICC. I have been with ICC for 25 years now, came in as a staff engineer. My current position is Senior Vice President of Product Development. And within ICC and SK Ghosh Associates, I've been pretty much in every department, in the codes department, in the technical services, in plan review and training and certification. So my 25 years shows that I've been in almost every department, have exposed to all of these issues. And it's very interesting as the impact of the COVID was really immediate for us. In our training world, both at SKGA and ICC, really most of our training was in-person training. I mean, we had online training, we had webinars, we had on-demand courses, we had the virtual classrooms, we had all of that. But for the most part, our activities were a lot focused on in-person classrooms. And the reason for that is obviously our members are very much like to be networking, to be communicating with their peers from across the country or the region and have face-to-face discussions. Obviously, when you're face-to-face with an instructor and your peers, it's a lot easier to communicate technical matters. So for us, it was an immediate abruption of business for the most part. And we had to immediately, first of all, ICC and all of the ICC family of solution entities had to move into home offices. That was a huge task. So first of all, we had to move all the staff into home offices, which I want to really commend our IT department, which were able to accommodate that flawlessly. And I know Chris Ristov is here on the call with us. And so I just want to thank him and all of the IT department for the smooth transition of all of the staff into home offices. And then, of course, the challenges of the staff actually, now everyone, rather than being next to each other in office settings, being able to communicate right away, walk a few feet and talk and resolve issues, now they had to do everything online. So that was huge. And on top of all of that, we had to take all of our courses and convert them to online, all of them. All of the in-person classrooms had to be converted. So it was a huge, complicated task. and the number of courses that ICC and SKGA teach together is really huge. And therefore, that was very challenging, but very, very successfully done by our staff, both in the IT department and in the training and education and SK Ghosh Associates. So those, I think, are very huge. The other challenge for us was that we obviously had short webinars, let's say 1 hour, hour and a half, 2 hour webinars, as well as half day or 1 day classes. Those are okay, you can somehow manage those. But we also, on the ICC side, have multi-day events. We have what we call institutes, which sometimes are 5 days. We have test academies, which are sometimes 3 or 4 days or 5 days. And we know that it's very well known that you can't keep people's attention to more than 1 or 2 hours in online anything. And so what we would do with 5 day or 3 day or 4 day institutes and test academies was a big issue for us. And I think at the end of the day, we decided it's impossible to take a 5 day, for example, institute, break it down into a month or two, because a lot of times people needed to get the information pretty much immediately, or in the case of our test academies, people wanted to go through these test academies and be able to actually go take a certification exam. So they didn't want to wait a month or two for us to break the training into smaller pieces. So what we are doing actually is we are doing multi-day seminars and webinars online. That's exactly what we are doing. And so that also creates a challenge for our technical staff, because a lot of our training is done by internal technical staff. But obviously, there are some people who feel more comfortable in teaching in person. Some are not very comfortable in teaching online. It creates its own challenges, as everybody mentioned, technology challenges and everything else. So we have had to actually rely a little bit more on outside contractors because of staffing issues and some staff who may not really do well online. So I think those are really a quick summary of things that we have done. We have our training department and SK Ghosh Associates very successfully are doing online training. I think besides that initial shock and having to convert everything quickly, right now I think things are pretty much back on normal for us. We're doing very well on both SKGA and ICC. One of the other things that helped us a lot was our preferred education provider network. We launched the preferred provider network in 2014, and currently there are more than 400 entities and individuals who are part of that network and teach classes and provide training. And the reason we created this network was that we realized it's impossible for ICC to be everything to everyone and teach 1,000 courses a day. Therefore, we had people in the industry who were providing great training, but their training was not accounted for continuing educations for people to renew their certifications. Therefore, we created this network which creates a collaboration between a lot of our partners and others in the industry, in the building safety industry, to be able to also provide training. So when the pandemic hit, when we were impacted some by providing all the training that we needed to, there were a lot of our preferred providers who already had online training as well. So that was another resource that our members or others interested could turn to. So I think pretty much that really quickly summarizes what we have been doing. I think what's going to happen, I think a lot of virtual settings is going to happen. I know a lot of our bigger chapters, and maybe Jessie is going to talk to this later, is that, for example, our Building Professional Institute here in Texas, which is a collaboration between Building Officials Association of Texas and the University of Texas Construction Research Center, they have been doing in-person training now for 28 years. And this year they have had to do it virtually. So 2 weeks ago, actually, here in Austin, the Central Texas PPI was going on. I went down there to visit them. And in each classroom, they had maybe 3 participants or 4 participants, but it was being conducted virtually. So they had maybe 30 or 40 people actually online participating. So I think that is probably the model that will be very effective going forward as the hybrid that has already been mentioned. So, and I think that's not going to change. I think for the most part, I think after this pandemic is over, we will be going to, I think, to a lot of in-person classes. But I think this hybrid format will be a very, very strong approach for us as well, and will continue because it will save people travel time, it will save travel expenses, and people actually, a lot of people actually now they are more accustomed to online training, whereas previously maybe they hesitated to do it. So I think all of that together tells us that the future will probably be very strongly on this hybrid model. And I will finish with the pricing impact. We did not really, for the most part, change our pricing structures. However, on the SK Ghosh Associate side, we did create a discount structure for small businesses. We did create some discount structure for others. And on the ICC side, for the contractor type training, where an entity would come to ICC and contract with ICC to provide training, we did provide some discount there because our instructors were not traveling anymore. It was being done online. So that created opportunity for us to provide some discounts. So I think that quickly summarizes pretty much what we have been doing at SK Ghosh Associates and ICC. Thank you very much.
There. Thank you very much, Hamid. I'm hearing some common themes here, which is not surprising. On that note, I'm going to call on James Williamette from the Chapter 3 Educational Institute.
Thank you. Actually, pretty much I heard a lot and I learned a lot. So thank you, one, for inviting me, because it's very nice to hear what different parts of the world is doing. One of the things I want to throw out to your group before I talk about the school is best practices. Major jurisdictions is always looking for best practices with the World Organization you guys got going and stuff. Some of the practices that are happening in other countries would be phenomenal to be shared with us. And at the same time, if they went and looked at the best practices we created, it'd be great. So, well, with that, I'm going to go back into the Region 3 school stuff. Currently, I co-chair with what Region 3 school. Region 3 school consists of Minnesota, North Dakota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and what we've done there is we looked at a lot of things when it hit us. We're like, what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? Because our business model and the way we run the school is all designed off how many people we have coming, because if you've ever run a school at all, you'll know that you've got certain things that happen as far as how the business works. The business works that you've got instructors at a certain cost, you got a hotel at a certain cost, you got food at a certain cost. You got to have so many people to make all those numbers work. So when you're in contracts with hotels, it gets very sticky, because this year was like, what do? We got a contract where you guaranteed this hotel this much money. We guaranteed them to do this much stuff. Luckily, we are also in contract with ICC. ICC was, they were great to work with. Liz was fabulous, talking back and forth with us on many different things. One of the things that we came across with is the online training and how we're going to do it. And ICC stepped up and said, yeah, we're willing to have all our instructors do online training. So we're going to have hybrid online training at our institute this year. Plus, we're also going to do face-to-face. One of the things that we heard from all of our members when we polled our members is we still want to do face-to-face. Let's keep social distancing. So we talked to the hotel, re-looked at the numbers, said, okay, this is how many people we got coming face-to-face. This is how many we may have coming hybrid-wise. What do you think? These are the numbers we're looking at. And the hotel actually sat with us and said, you know, this is a partnership. Let's try to make this work the best we can. We're all in the same boat, so let's do the best we can. And in Region 3, we do about 1,450 training days a year is what we average. And those people we're training are building officials, designers, and contractors. And building officials and designers and contractors are all required to have what's called CEUs, continued education units for the state of Minnesota to maintain your license. So that's kind of how we're working on some of that. So impact of the pandemic, it has changed the way we've done business. I shared some of those things earlier with you. One of the things that came into play right away was the access for Team Online, streaming video in and out, how we're going to do it, who's going to host it, all those things. Those were all huge issues that we looked at, and different issues on how we're going to deal with it. We were lucky because we had Greg Smith. He's been doing presentations for quite a while on his own from out of Duluth, and he's been doing Zoom trainings and different trainings, and he was on our education committee. He sat with us. We talked about different ideas and different things, and we landed up some of the best ways to do it was contracting a hosting agency, PASAV. They're hosting. So we're going to actually be streaming stuff into the hotel for people that want to be at the hotel. And also we'll be streaming it to the people's computers in their offices. So with that came pricing. We were trying to figure out how to create the pricing for people that are at the hotel versus the non-hotel ones, which was also interesting to work through some of those issues that we dealt with. Let's see, business model pricing impacts. So, like I said, basically how we do it is we actually put everything on a spreadsheet, all of our costs, our instructors' costs, hotel costs, food, drinks. If we decide that we want to keep our food, drink out for longer periods of time, sometimes we add that in there. Printing costs of our handouts, our record keeping, our name tags, our registration, all that goes on a spreadsheet. And then we basically just kind of always worked backwards to say, okay, this is what our hard costs are. What do we have to charge for a fee? That's how we've always gotten to our fees. So best practices, laying out the expenses. That's very important. One of the things when you're laying out all expenses and the other things is brainstorming. A couple you've already mentioned earlier, plan. You can never plan enough for an institute, and you can never plan enough for this crazy world we're living in right now with everything that's happening. It's definitely an interesting time that we're going through. Well, like I said, though, we are lucky because we do have contracts with ICC. ICC's been really good to us. The other advantage what we have is some of our chapters have chapter training days. We utilize those chapter training days to help offset some of our costs. Those chapter training days is what we're hoping is going to float us through this year to make it work between that and the funds that we got coming in. So we're anticipating maybe a break even or a short loss with the funds with the school that we're proposing to put on this February. So delivery method, training and post-pandemic, I honestly agree with all of you. I think online training is here to stay. It's something that a lot of people may ask for. I know that when we polled our members, once again, many members said, no, we would rather go face-to-face. We want that face-to-face interaction. One of the comments I remember reading was, I learn more at lunch than I do in class sometimes. I was like, wow, I kind of learn more in class sometimes, but either or. But so those were some of the things that we dealt with and how we dealt with it and going forward. I'm trying to jam through fast because I know you have other people on there. But those are the main things I can think of at this time.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. Again, some common themes going ahead forward, and actually, I'm impressed that you're still able to do a little bit of face-to-face. That's great because you know what, both methods have their need and have their place in the training area. Our last panelist is going to be Jessie Sorensen, and she's representing the Colorado chapter ICC. So, welcome, Jessie.
Hello, thanks for having me. I have to say that I think I got more out of this than you might get out of me. So super score, thank you. My name is Jessie Sorensen. I am the commercial plans examiner for the town of Parker in Colorado. I also am the chair of education for Permit Tech Nation, the Colorado Association of Permit Techs, And then I'm the vice chair for the education and a committee member for the Colorado chapter. I really like education. Or I drew the short straw too many times. The impact it's had on us chapter-wise. So as the Colorado chapter, it's been huge. The numbers are down for probably 50% overall for in person. It's created a burden. Getting volunteers to set it up. The Colorado chapter is ran by all volunteers. So we're all just code nerds that try to run the Colorado chapter. So we're dealing with the work pandemic as well as the education and the chapter side of it, as you all would probably understand the same. It's just a big learning curve and in a bigger time commitment than I think most of us were used to. So time is a big one for impact, especially while trying to maintain the standard of education that we're used to providing. How did we adapt? Technology. As a millennial, and I can make fun of myself because I'm totally a millennial, it was hard for me to adapt to the new technology changes. So even learning Zoom and GoToWebinar, and Judy was so kind today to call me and run me through WebEx, because this is my first time running through WebEx and Teams and learning the different functions and functionality. And that's not just me, that's teaching our members those. And we're really good about sending out tutorials prior to using a webinar system. And then being able to like have somebody available constantly before a training so that they have questions and we can trial it and send them invites and make sure that they get all the information. We're going to continue virtual classes. We were lucky enough this year to hold our institute in March. Our Colorado Educational Institute is in its like 37th year. It's 5 days. It brings in about 700 people a day, 13 classes a day. It's normally held at a hotel. So we got that off in person the first week of March this year. Next year, we actually polled our members, and 60% of them actually said they were able and willing to come to an in-person training. So we thought it would help decide if we wanted to stick with in-person and stick with the CDC guidelines, or if we wanted to just go all virtual. And then a lot of you have talked about the hybrid model, which I'm really curious what programs you would use for hybrid. So maybe we can chat about that later. But the cost to the education to the chapter is way too great to get internet to each room in a hotel, as well as recording equipment to do a hybrid. So we weren't able to cost effectively do that without raising the fees a lot for the classes. So what we've decided to do is, and one of the education chapters or big thing is, I don't think they've raised the cost of education in the 60+ years it's been a chapter. So they're big on keeping the price super low because it's more about the education than the funds to the chapter. So this year we are taking our 60 platform classes and turning them into 30. It will be all virtual. We are not going to do any in person. Oh, I lost it. So we're going to offer the full week, we're going to offer a few classes a day, and then we're going to continue it throughout the year. So every week or every 2 weeks, we will continue the other 30 classes throughout the year. So if there's a class you really wanted or needed, it'll just maybe not be available that first week. So they're all going to happen, hopefully the 30 of them, but it'll be throughout the year. And we also cut the price in half per class. So now that we're not doing the hotel and we're not doing the rooms and we're not doing the food and the drink, we were able to actually reduce more of the cost. And then I think that's it for the chapter. I appreciate somebody, I think it was you, Lynn, that brought up the restriction of people. We have not even considered, I mean, we were expecting to have 100, 200 students per class, and that's huge because now we can discuss that, especially if that's been an issue to other people. The chapter meetings now we host every other month virtually, and then the only problem we've had is the broadband and the internet. So we've actually had to stand somebody up in a jurisdiction that's willing to stay there and host it and back up for the instructor and all of the students so that we have the internet function, because our home wireless internets aren't strong enough, apparently. And then we're going to continue virtual classes until we're done. Permatech Nation has been holding webinars. I think we're going into our 3rd or 4th year. So on a bonus side, I'm really excited that more instructors, for lack of terms, are forced to go to virtual training, because there's actually a lot of chapters out there that seek it and not many people offered it until this. So it's really refreshing to see more people get on board with online training, because some places across the United States, or that's all they have, is the option of online training. They're very rural places, or they're permatechs that, you know, can't get away from the front counter, so that's all they get. Delivery method. And I think that's all I got.
That's fantastic, Jessie. Again, some common themes here, and I'm almost thinking the 5 of us that have been on this panel almost need to have another conversation back and forth after this to answer some of each other's questions and go with some more suggestions. We did only have one question in the Q&A, and it was really a general question about whether or not if you had required CEUs, like continuing education units, and renewals, if there was some ability to put those on hold, or if there was a requirement to put those on hold in your general areas. And I can say on behalf of OBOA, our certification program is a voluntary certification program. We do have continuing education requirements with it, but it's on a 3-year cycle. So we were fortunate, we were just at the beginning of a 3-year cycle. So we've had requests to look at it, but we didn't feel we actually needed to do anything at this point in time, but we'll have to revisit that if this continues on and there are limitations to getting training out there. So we are actually running a little bit behind on our agenda, but I anticipate there's probably only about another.
Excuse me, Lynn, I'm sorry. Yep. I told Ron that I would take him off of mute because he had something to mention about the training in Las Vegas.
Perfect.
Ron, you're off of mute.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. First, LLMS, we have a professionally managed institute. It's one of the larger ones in the country. Last year we had some 3,800 classroom days, 2,000 people attending. We had 100 classes on 18 tracks. This year we reduced it to 12 tracks and 85 classes. The demand was overwhelming for in-person. We are providing a hybrid session. We're doing a couple mixes in order to provide books or supplemental material, including PDF and security encrypted types of thought we get a little bit of reduction in price, but that actually reflects we're working actually right this minute. Al is meeting with the Orleans Hotel. I think I set the date there, March 1st and 5th. But the key with EduCode, since we had so many other things, not just classes, we had something like 4 networking sessions. Only about that, but networking was, and people wanted networking, and the people who had come here before wanted networking. So again, we're going to do hybrid and see how it works. I do not see the future being extensively hybrid. All the chapter meetings since COVID announcements have been virtual. Given some, I've taught some classes in a virtual format, a webinar. I like it? No, because I like the feedback from people. But it are hard to access clients. So with that, I'm getting out of it. Keep you guys moving.
Okay, thanks, Ron.
Just have a quick one, Lynn.
Sorry, yes, Jeff?
Yeah, sorry, just as a quick one. Look, in my part-time academic life, I can say our university moved last semester to all virtual, which was very, very difficult to change a technical building regulation program into virtual. This semester we've moved to a hybrid model, and as a lecturer it is very, very hard because you're looking at people in your class and you forget about the people on the video, and you start pointing at emergency lights and exit signs, and you go over and walk over to the smoke alarm panel and start doing testing. The people online miss out. So it's very hard as a hands-on practical lecturer in the hybrid model. Universities advise we're doing hybrid again next semester, but then hopefully move back to all face-to-face. But I preferred the fully offline version to the hybrid model because as a lecturer, you just forget where you are. When you're standing in the classroom, you've been so used to standing in front of a classroom. It's so hard. Our institute in Australia, basically you can travel within your state, but you can't travel to other states. So I actually conducted our first face-to-face training to members last week, actually, which was quite refreshing to see people on that line. But everything that's been said by all the other speakers, yep, agree totally, and that's exactly what's happening over here.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff.